Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And of course, for the news we have to start with the update that CCP has done to their plans for mining, ores, compression and all of that stuff. So I would say that it is good news. Of course it's relative good news because it's coming as an update on something that was received very badly by a part of the player base, I'm going to say, which was of course the planned update with the waste mechanic, the compression changes, and then the massive nerfs to the Rorcal and the Orca that are still there, especially the Rorcal I would say, but yeah, the Orca gets a little bit of mining bonuses back. So on that end, personally, I feel like, sure, the Orca doesn't have to be like your best high-sec option yield-wise, but at least I have to feel like it's still a mining ship as well, so that I can fly it even solo, which I think I will do. Considering the changes that we've seen now, because you're getting an inherent drone mining bonus and you're also getting one for the new compact industrial core that the Orca will use. But the big changes, of course, is number one, that compression is delayed until 2022, and they'll look at how they want to implement that for the command ship, so for the Orca, Rorcal and the Porpoise, which is, I think, a very good choice, because in one of the threads I clearly remember that some, I would say, back of the envelope calculations showed that the Rorcal compression, for instance, would really only be able to keep up compression wise with a very small amount of input, and that it would basically become a massive time sink where you're just there compressing ore in what felt like was going to be a very convoluted way of having to handle the ores in a specific hold, and then you can compress and you'll have to manually move that stuff. So it really felt bad, I think, and CCP is listening to that. Hopefully they can come up with a system that makes sense and that doesn't feel like it's going to become a massive time sink just to compress the ore at a loss on top of that. Then the waste mechanic gets changed quite massively. Now I only quickly skimmed the changes that were announced on the forum post, but if I'm not mistaken, the offensive mining crystals are gone. Let me know in the comments if that's right or not, but I don't think anyone minded the fact that that would exist in the game, but at least the full design philosophy of mining waste has changed, with Tech 1 not having waste, Tech 2 having waste, and then if you go all out into faction pieces, which some of you guys obviously do, you'll again have the higher yield without the waste, which honestly makes a lot more sense from just the general direction that CCP has been going with the development of EVE Online. So this was really like an old classic where you needed to skill up and get into the higher tier gear in order to counteract the waste mechanic, but everyone very quickly pointed that this was just a very punishing way of introducing waste for new players, which is of course the type of players that we don't want to scare away from a career as a miner, especially not onboarding them into groups. And so CCP listened on that. Getting into Tech 1 mining won't mean that you'll be destroying half the belt of your corp mates or your alliance. So I would say pretty good news on that as well. And then the Rorcal is still getting massively nerfed on the yield, which I think is normal. I mean, that was just never going to go away. You're not going to be able to park half a dozen Rorcals in a mining belt and get the best yield anymore. It is going to move to barges, where they've said that their design goal is to massively increase their HP and give them better mining yields. So overall, I am from neutral to positive, because this feels like it is going to be a lot less punishing for new players. I'll still probably be able to fly out my Orca and at least do some mining with it, even if it's not the best, if we can then combine that with having the Orca with massive EHP, which is a lot more difficult to gank, and then the ability to compress on the spot. I do think that there is, even for a solo player, a case to be made that, alright, I could actually mine solo in an Orca. I don't have to move into having barges or anything like that if I'm willing to just take the yield loss, and then maybe mining in a barge and then moving it to an Orca would be the most efficient, but you're not forced into the barge playstyle or into the group playstyle that much. So I'm definitely positive, but it must be noted, of course, that we're positive coming from a theoretical standpoint where I don't think a lot of us wanted to be at. Next quick update, actually a real life one. You probably noticed no videos this week. This is a little bit of a combination, but yeah, kind of busy at work. I had to do some stuff. We also have to try to finish a couple of projects, so needed to spend some extra work there. That is the reason, not the update or anything like that. I'm still playing the game every day, just, you know, never felt like, all right, I'm gonna make a video for the last week. It was really playing a little bit of EVE Online and then playing some other games. I actually tried the Halo Infinite for an evening as well, did a little bit of Path of Exile, did a little bit of Civilization 6 actually, so I've just been trying to relax, which was needed because of my real life work. But alright, that means that we can take a look at the New Eden store, see if there's anything happening over here. The IGC skins, those new ones, are up and they do look pretty damn cool, but then it's the bundles or the bundaroos. Yeah, I've been watching some South Park as well, and then on the services front we notice nothing too special, so no sales on the New Eden store this week. That means that we get to move on to the market with plex and stuff coming in at 645. There we go, and we will start with a plex and then the chart here, and you can see a little bit of hesitation in the market here. You may have already spotted that on the ticker as well. Plex taking a little bit of a beating from a 1-year high point, so it's definitely quite relative, but you can see that 5-day moving average touching that 20-day moving average, and the dailies in the last couple of days have been you know, below both of these, so there is still some downward pressure on Plex. We're also noticing the lower volumes here, so the trade changes, right, the return of the taxes has definitely not helped. That won't be helping with velocity, and we're losing a little bit in price, probably because we have reached that 1-year high point, and once we go above the 3 million, the market's having a difficult time saying we're gonna keep plexes there, because it'll go even higher, and that means that the sell prices in JITA at least have gone down to just below 3 million, and the buyers are at 2.8 million for plex. Going to the trading hub, not a lot of competition and pretty much in the same range for the sellers, and then the buyers are dominating a little bit, going up just a touch, but a lot of these I think have that one jump range, so they're made in JITA 4.4, but they are trying to buy in the Tranquility Trading Tower for a better price. Tax-wise, there is an advantage to doing this. So overall though, a little bit of pressure on the price and back to a narrow margin on that return to a price below 3 million. For the multiple pilot trading certificates, we're seeing something similar. Of course, it is a different chart and actually some higher volumes in the last couple of days as we went back below 1.5 billion on the chart for the average prices. Sellers are still above 1.5 billion, but buyers have gone to 1.44 billion. So again, a little bit of narrowing of the margin, but while we put a little bit of downward pressure on the prices as well, which means that now we have trade happening in both sales and in buys in order to get this average price. And so this seems to be a slightly stronger consensus than the 1-year high points above 1.5 billion for the training certificates as well. The skill extractors actually doing their own little thing. You can see here we have a volume blip. This was a very specific extractor 2-for-1 opportunity that CCP put up together with the Rorcal nerf announcement, so lots of players did notice that. It has its impact on the market, meaning that we don't have a second double top here above 350 million for skill extractors, at least not a sustained one on the 5-day moving average. And now the pressure is actually building together, I think, with the plex pressure, and then of course as well the potential extra volumes from the sale. So we are now at dominated by the Tranquility Trading Tower, 340 million for the sellers, 330 for the buyers, again narrowing of the margin on this downward pressure. Then the impact on the injectors, which last week were basically flat at that high point above 680, but yeah, to no avail. Now we are going back down below 680 on the chart, and we are in fact going down decently quickly, 655, 60 million for the large scale injectors trade, again coming back to the Tranquility Trading Tower here. And then the buyers are at 638. You can see that here, 17 million in margin between sellers and buyers on something that costs 600 plus million. That's a pretty narrow margin despite the potentially higher taxes at the moment. For the small scale injector, we do have the double top that's shown here. We touched 140 and then we went well above 145 on this. No. Yeah, actually, man, there's still something wrong here, I think, but all right. 140, well above the 145 million on this part of the chart, and then we are now back down to, well, still above 140 on the chart. Let's see if that's correct. Nope, you can see it is not. 135 million for the sellers, 127 for the buyers. So I'm gonna suspect that this is 135 actually, and this is the 140. So from well above that, the same double top we saw in Plex, basically a little bit too much too quickly as well, and a bit of some downward pressure, which means that they are also a little bit more affordable, of course. And 135 to 127, again less than 10 million in margin between those two on something that costs 130, 140 million ISK is a pretty narrow margin. So quite a bit of competition as well. So I think that there are plenty of buyers that do expect long term that we will have higher prices on monetary inflation, which I think is the reality in an online sandbox economy or an MMO. You know, there's always going to be more ISK or more gold created than destroyed. It just would feel very badly if we were in a game where that's the actual reverse, and so upwards pressure should just be in general the reality. But at the moment, of course, you know, we're at these high prices, so it's difficult to know in the short to medium term what we're gonna see. The daily alpha injectors, that is obviously yet another CCP sale after reaching that 1-year high point, getting above 50 million ISK. CCP kind of intervened, which, I mean, they've sort of shared that this is part of their current design philosophy, is that they are looking at keeping the economy healthy and injecting stuff into the economy using, for instance, the events. And I think that they may be doing the same thing when it comes to sales, keeping an eye on a healthy ecosystem, for instance, for these daily alpha injectors. That's at least been my conjecture, and I'm sure that CCP will have the metrics to either back that up or they could tell me that I'm wrong on this, but I'm seeing 40 to 45 million as a good price range for an alpha player to hunt for when they're building up their character. You know, getting a little bit lucky in exploration, getting that 50, 100 million drop is like, yeah, awesome. That'll feel really good. I just made up for another day as well. I can buy 2 injectors, get ahead of the game, but at the same time, it is a carrot to chase that's quite doable on a daily basis. And as a result, you know, it together with Plex, we did go to that 1-year high point, and getting above that 50 million range may be quite hard, or quite a bit harder than getting that 40 to 45 million range between sellers and buyers. And so now on big volumes, we dropped off below 40 million ISK again, 42 million for the sellers, 37 for the buyers. Normal margin, I would say, between sellers and buyers here, despite this downtrend. And of course, this is a CCP sale that has basically renormalized it. And at the moment, yeah, a daily alpha player that wants to get that daily boost in SP just needs to get back to 40 million, which is definitely doable in my opinion. And then finally we get the hypercores that also basically cool down a little bit after reaching 330,000 1-year high point, and that inflationary run-up of the last couple of months, you could say, is now stalling. Clearly hesitation in the market. 320,000 for the sellers, 302,000 for the buyers, again less than 10% margin as well, which is not that much. Next up, let's take a look at the minerals coming in at 1445. That could be interesting, of course, because doubling the amount of ores that's out there is very nice. Now the waste mechanic won't be so punishing, so the availability will go up, but this also does mean that we'll need more time. We'll need to spend more time in belts in general to get more ore out there, especially with Rorcal being nerfed so much. So the latest EVE pulse, by the way, also dropped, and is definitely worth a look because they quickly cover some of the highlights of the monthly economic report, which I have not had the time to read through just yet. But let's get started, as always, with titanium. That's actually up a little bit, back above 4.5 ISK for a couple of days. At the moment falling back, but we are talking in GTA itself. Well, 447 was the sale when I was coming in. Someone is a little bit aggressive here at 435 with 433 for the buyers, but you can see that for now the market is not saying this glut, this doubling of the amount of feldspar is going to completely crush the titanium price, because of course time will still be needed. Mining yields will go up for the mining barges, but then compression is still quite convoluted. It's not clear that we'll get much more ore in the same amount of time. That's probably not the case, especially including nullsec. Then for pyrite, we've got a flat chart that's staying on the neutral average. I would actually say that the update kind of cements that for me, because the Orca gets a little bit back in its mining potential. And the philosophy is clear. Mining barges will get more AHP and more mining yield, which means safer and more ore per second. There's more available as well. But in high sec, of course, I'm not really sure that it's going to be that big of an impact in general, because lower prices in these high-sec minerals, in my opinion, will also mean lower activity very quickly. And that means that we get to 1733 for the sellers and 1732 for the buyers. That's the narrowest possible margin in GTA itself. In the Tranquility Trading Tower, they're coming in at 1720 for some sellers, and actually quite a bit of volume there as well, almost 500 million units. Almost 400 million units here being sold in the Tranquility Trading Tower, but very narrow margin at the current price. And so the market is like, yeah, this is what we're expecting. We're not expecting major moves in pyrite. And then finally we get Mixelon, that did know a announcement bump and basically just absorbed that and calmed down a little bit, but clearly at a higher average price than a month ago or throughout the summer. 65.20 for the sellers, 62.63 for the buyers. So again, pretty narrow margin. We're up a little bit for Mixelon, which is of course actually good news for people that are mining at the moment. Then we've got Isogen that had that other step up and had to give back a little bit after going above 100 ISK. But look at that, market wants to get back to that 100 daily average, are already trying to bounce back in the higher direction. So sellers in GTA coming in at 99.98 or 100 ISK, buyers coming in at 90.60. There's still opening up a little bit of margin here, which I think is normal. If you look at still 75 million units here, 120 million units here, there are still some Isogen stocks out there, but the impact is starting to be a lot less when it comes to basically completely dominating and freezing that market up at these low prices, which you can see from February to March. I think that was the 4 billion unit sell order that was a bit of a problem. When that finally lapsed and we kept nibbling at it, we got that boost to 75, a little bit of recovery, and then again bigger orders do keep things in check below at around 60, but now that has been broken and we are already now this is a big step into what I am expecting to become the norm for Isogen, definitely above Mixelon. I think has to be the name of the game, and this To me, 120 million here, 75 here, 25 million here, 40, 20. You can see there's still some really big round sell orders coming in at regular intervals. Does mean that there is still room for Isogen to grow up in price, to go higher in price as we work through these 10 millions of sell orders, which I don't think are easily mined today. Then we've got the Noxium chart that actually sees a little bit of pressure going back down to 8,000 ISK for the sellers and the buyers at 990. So seeing a little bit of pressure on Noxium, which is in general actually not bad news for industrialists, and maybe the update is part of the reason for this. Again, a little bit of a cooldown period, because actually now especially waste will be gone, so the availability of Noxium will go back up, and I don't think that it's inconceivable that times spent in low sec builds can still go up. Here I think a little bit of cooling down is not bad news. This is the most expensive Tech 1 mineral, and it is possible that we'll actually see more supplies after the patch as well. Then we've got for nullsec the Zydrine chart, which is also interesting. You may have seen the same thing on Megasite, a little bit of a jump there, back to 1000 ISK as well, becoming competitive with Noxium. It doesn't last very long. You can see that nullsec has those regular supplies at the ready, 985 for the sellers, 967 for the buyers, so still a little bit below Noxium, but definitely competitive with it. And this of course is the Rorcal nerf that is showing up, because if there's one region in space that will need to spend more time in space to get those double resources from space into the cargo holds, it is in nullsec, of course, which at the moment can still field those massive Rorcal fleets and just get the best yield from a single ship. The most expensive one as well, granted. But this is clearly the expectation that it will not be cheaper Zydrine, it'll actually be more expensive. And then Megasite is actually doing the same right now, heading back towards 600 ISK, which is still relatively low, of course, 588 to 577. And I think some of you guys pointed this out. Megasite is different from Zydrine because there are Pogven resources that will provide this as well. So they have extra avenues for creating Megasite into the game that are getting this 40% discount compared to Zydrine, and that also probably explain why Zydrine has this big jump, and then alright, we're going up in price because of these announced changes, which Megasite has not, although it has a little bit of influence from all of that. And then finally we've got Morphite for Tech 2, that to me feels like it's pretty much flat for the last couple of months. So again, there, after the initial amount of Morphite, which has doubled, which will double again, for now the market is saying, yeah, but everything on the other side of the equation, with waste, with nerfs to Rorcal or cap mining capabilities, it won't mean that the floodgates have been opened just yet for Morphite either, and so we're still at 66,000 for the sellers, 60,000 for the buyers. Next up, the PI market, that's coming in at 2245. Alright, all 45s so far. Let's take a look at these then. This is kind of to be expected. Interesting that we had started to see this decline a little bit before the announcement, but before everyone puts on their tinfoil hat, it did come after a 1-year high point, which is very enticing, I think, to start to move some of your production towards these advanced PI materials. And yeah, for the last couple of months, I think it would have been a good idea to be able to produce these types of PI materials, because of course there was this increased demand for these goods because of the industry changes. Now that part gets nerfed a little bit. The need for PI is going down in some of these builds, and so this is only going to accelerate that move that was already started from the 1-year high point. So we're back below 1.5 million for broadcast nodes, just above that for the sellers, but look at that, 1.3 million for the buyers. Everyone is now very careful, which we may not need that much for broadcast nodes, and it is of course very interesting that CCP tries to rectify the industry imbalance a little bit, tries to put a balance pass on that, and that the first thing that they're hitting is actually PI, which is actually the most passive part of those changes in the production cycle. And of course, this won't be good news for the rest of the lower end refined PI materials here, for instance, as construction blocks gets back to close to a 1-year low point, 6,650 for the sellers, 6,200 for the buyers. That's very cheap. Consumer electronics also going back below 6,000 disc, so the pressure is there. This also still, it was already a very low price. Construction blocks actually made their way back a little bit towards 8K, which was like, I think 20% below what you would normally expect. Consumer electronics actually were already at like half the normal price that I historically remember. 6,000 for the sellers, 5,500 for the buyers. Coolants also taking a little bit of a hit, but yeah, tied to fuels, it is a little bit different. Still staying close to 10,000 disc after reaching that 1-year high point and back in a more normal ballpark. 9,900 for most sellers. We're actually going to go with JITA prices for the sellers here, 9,900 for the sellers and 8,900 for the buyers. That margin though is opening up, so pressure is here in the PI materials, which is normal considering the announcement. Cryoprotectant solutions seeing a bit of pressure as well, staying above 100k for the sellers, but 92.5 for the buyers. Again, yeah, it's opening up. Here I think the tax changes are a part of that as well, but it's clear that demand is like down. Enriched uranium landing on 8750 on the chart, 9.1 to 8.8 for the buyers. A little bit more incoming there, but I just see this as stabilization on the average price, and it is one of the harder to make ones fuel related, so not complete surprise. Integrity response drones, there is obviously the announcement impact back well below 1.5 million. Well below that for the sellers and 1.3 million for the buyer. So again, big margin opening up there. Mechanical parts 7.5 ish, yeah, 7,250, 7,000, and we're actually going down decently quickly as well here on these buy prices. It's just a reality. This announcement has probably cemented a little bit that passive income, passive stuff is not what CCP wants to increase in value too much. Nanites are at 5,000, which again is very cheap. Nano factories, here again we actually had a September 1-year high point going up above 1 million ISK. Then it was like a little bit too much for the market, but we could see a little bit of hesitation here and there, for instance at 840, and then here as well just below 800,000 ISK. But now on the announcement it's just not gonna come back, and we're actually back at a 1-year low point for nano factories, 680,000 to 670,000. At least we're stopping here, so that's good news. Organic mortar applicators, right, same depression here at the tail end, back below 750. 750 for the sellers, 650 for the buyers, and it's really the demand side that has been gutted by the announcement. We've got recursive computing modules back below 1 million as well, and in fact another 995 pretty much for the sellers and 906 for the buyers, so that 10% margin is back in the advanced PI materials as well. Robotics flat above 60, which is still 40% below the average price historically speaking. Self-harmonizing power cores, I mean it's gonna be a trend of course in the entire PI segment here. We're holding on to almost 1.3 million. 1.2 million for the buyers. I do think that there's room for this to go even lower. Sterile conduits, same story again, back below 900,000 on average. That means 940 to 794. That's a 150,000 ISK margin here between sellers and buyers, which is quite a lot for something that's below 1 million ISK and way bigger than what we've seen during the summer, let's say, where sterile conduits could command a price of well above 1 million. Ucomi superconductors still doing okay at 80,000, and then finally the wetware mainframes. That's the final one that's actually still lagging behind on the depression side, but it's not gonna last too long. 1.6 plus million for the sellers, but 1.4 million for the buyers. The buyers are clearly drying up in advanced PI materials. Very, very interesting, big turnaround, potentially very important for players that do a lot of PI. Next up, Advanced Moon Materials, 29 minutes, but first quick drink. There we go. Advanced PM materials. Honestly, if there's one thing that could see a little bit of pressure in my expectation from the dev block, it's this double available moon mining. And well, I think moon mining is a bit more organized, and so the goal of getting everything hot that you're producing is definitely there, at least in some aspects of the game. So I would expect a bit of pressure. Let's see if I'm right. Crystalline carbonite clearly sinks that pressure back down to the 150 range all of a sudden at the tail end. Still 170 for the sellers, but 153 for the buyers that are saying should be plenty of supplies. So again, it's a little bit of a drop off in demand seemingly, but I think this part is on expectations of more supplies coming online. Then we've got for Caldari titanium carbide that tried to make its way back above 200 ISK, but to no avail, and today's daily average is clearly below the last couple of months. 182 to 143 again. Yeah, look, demand just gone all of a sudden, and here again I think it is because they're expecting those lower prices, those plentiful supplies to come in later down the line. Then we get Fernite carbide for Minmatar. Yep, right here, going back below 150, which we haven't seen in the last 8 months or so. 159 still for the sellers, but 142.8 for the buyers, opening up that margin yet again. And then tungsten carbide for Amar was already on the downslide and is now back below 150, 145 to 129.80, so 130. That again is showing demand dropping off quite a lot. For the metamaterials that have stayed quite stable through all of this, I think they might become a little bit of a casualty here as well, but it is a different process. I think you do have to use a little bit of what's it called again? I keep forgetting it, but transmutation I'm gonna call it. I'm sure you guys know exactly what I mean if I say that. And yeah, it is reacting differently. That's very, very interesting. You can see that this one actually went to that below average price point, and now as a reaction, market reaction on this, buyers came in and pushed the price back to that 12.5k, 12.140, 150 for the sellers, almost 12,000 for the buyers. Photonic metamaterials definitely back on the average train, which was the name of the game for the last year, one of the only materials that managed to do that. Nonlinear for Caldari, flat below 20,000, a little bit of pressure, but clearly not a trend break just yet. 19,000 to 19,000, a bit above and a bit below. So this again, to me, feels quite nicely, slightly below average, but not too distressing. And then we get the plasmonic metamaterials for Minmatar. Again, right, look at that. Despite the clear downtrend to all of the carbides in the last couple of days, this one is managing to stay very neutral. At around 17.4 for the sellers. Whoops, and something fell at the neighbors. Hope it didn't come through too much. 14,500 for the buyers. That's a bit of margin though. That's opening up there as well. And then terahertz metamaterials for the Amar, bouncing off again from that below average price point. So that feels kind of normal too. For the other advanced moon materials, all right, fermionic condensate staying above 60,000 ISK. So I would have expected pressure here, but that's not coming true. 66,000 to 64,000, so that's one is actually doing all right on this 1 year chart. Then we get ferrogel, up all of a sudden. Is that tied to mining times needed? It is possible, or this could be a speculative one. I'm not sure. I'm not seeing the volumes for that, so that's very interesting. From 30,000 and then all of a sudden shooting up to 40,000 for the sellers, 34 for the buyers. Fullerites, that one is staying at 750, seeing some pressure, so not much to say here. Hypersynaptic fibers though, that one jumped up like a week ago and are still there. almost 11,000 for the sellers, almost 10,000 for the buyers. Nano transistors staying below 4,000, so very mixed picture here. Phenolic composites then 1 year low point, pretty much 1250, a little bit above that, 1340 for the sellers, 1300 for the buyers, but clearly not doing that well. And then our oxidizers super flat, reinforced carbon fibers up just a little bit, but honestly there's not that much to say here either. And then the ceramic fibers back under pressure. What a surprise! Honestly, other advanced mood materials have broken up. Ferrogel, surprise, spike, then hypersynaptic fibers, also a surprise spike. A couple of them are, well, on the average for the year, which is not great, granted, but then we also have a 1 year low point pretty much, so a very mixed picture in the advanced mood materials, and a couple of these clearly tradable moves all of a sudden on the market as well. Not what I expected, but very good news potentially then for the Tech 2 market. Let's hope that volatility can come back throughout the market, because of course for traders that is their bread and butter. Next up, the Tech 2 ships at 36 minutes then. There we go, back to the round timestamps. Let's see what's happening here. So the Basilisk, after reaching that low point that was clearly tradable, I think you could have bought below 180 or just above 180. We did normalize, and unfortunately not the good old volatility where we could gain quite a bit in a matter of a week. 202 million for the sellers, 184 for the buyers. So just a little bit of an upside for the sellers, but the margin is still there. And so, yeah, this is unfortunately not, of course, what you're looking for. But I have warned for this. I got the feeling that all that volatility was leaving the Tech 2 market, and that as a result, I was basically bargain hunting in the last couple of months, which, like, 10 days ago or so for the Basilisk was definitely possible. Cerberus unfortunately has been here for the last month or so in that 230 range, so that's a no. It is starting to drop off a little bit, but our buyers below 200 million. No, still at 210, 203, 210, 220 for the sellers, so that's still in like not the buy zone and not the sell zone in my opinion, unless you're a producer. The Guardian, which last month had a buy opportunity below 180, I think you could have bought at like 164 or something like that at a real low point, so we just recovered from that yet again. 186 for most sellers, 170 for the buyers. I mean, 170 is not bad for the buyers, but yeah, I think honestly you probably should have bought here, because you could have gone well below the entire chart, and I would wait for us to touch this low again on the chart before jumping in. Then we've got the Hound just below 25. Again, you can see on the chart that this is not where you want to be to either buy or sell, honestly, if you're a trader, so not much to say. Iquitursa getting back to 650, 661 for the seller, 610 for the buyers. A little bit more expensive in the last couple of months, so upwards pressure on Triglavian prices. Then we've got the Ishtar that's staying below 200 million ISK, so that 200 million, 187 for the buyers. You're buying below 190. Yeah, you can consider still buying an Ishtar at the moment, in my opinion. Then we get the Manticore, which bounces up from 25, but again, sellers are now coming in at 29 million and just below 25 for the buyers. This is not a tradable move up, unfortunately. The Munin is dropping off quite sharply, so if those buyers are below 180, which are not, 183 for the buyers, 191 for the buyers, so that again is a no. Then we get the Nemesis, that's again slowly making its way back up. Yeah, we could have bought 23 weeks ago or something like that, but now 24 to 22, that's a big no again. Oniros dropping off to below 160 potentially, 168 to 155, yeah. It's still those logistics cruisers on this type of a chart. If you need that Tech 2 purchase, it makes sense to do it now. Then the Panther, for a general feeling, getting back to that 1.1 billion. So here, yeah, basically it's not moving that much. 1.2 for the sellers, just above a billion for the buyers. Purifier, right? This was tradable, right? Getting to 35 million, and then this downside, that's nice. And I still have 1 hour, right? I think I still have 1 hour. I hope. Yeah, should be. Okay. Let's check. Yeah. All right. I still have an hour, so we're good. So going from here 35 million and then back down, but where are those buyers? How close to 20 million are they? 21 million to 24. I think you can see that there's not that many buyers. You could probably try to buy a purifier if you really want to. Scimitar going back up, so that's back in that no man's land between highs and lows. 199 to 181. Yeah, trying to buy below 180 makes a lot more sense, of course. The Widow, all right, bit of a move up here. Data point at 125 billion, completely empty. 1.5 billion for the sellers and just above a billion for the buyers. So I think this gap will be plugged decently quickly. And then the Zealot is moving down sharply. Data points a couple of days ago below 180. We're talking less than 180 for the sellers, 168 for the buyers. Looking at the charts, buying a cheap Zealot at the moment does make sense. Finally, this is what I call a nice chart if you're looking for those bargains. A Zealot is a possibility for sure. Keep one thing in mind though, it has very low daily volumes. Next up, the Tech Tree ships. That's at 40 minutes. All right. That's easy for the timestamps. Let's see what's happening here, because the Confessor was back up. Yeah, it was at 55 million, landing on 50 again. So quickly absorbed here by supplies. You can see that here as well. 210 should finally bring a little bit of stability to the Confessor at 50 million as the high point, 45 for the buyers. I'd still call that a good price, very expensive, and so kind of normal that you're seeing 210 of them coming in here and lots of supplies in the Confessor. Then the Hecate is below 50 million, so here supplies might drop off a little bit. 49 for the sellers, 45 for the buyers. Normalization, yep, still decent supply, nothing outlandish here. Then we've got the Jackdaw that's back up above 50 million yet again, 52 million, driving decent supply, not in many orders, but volume wise it's decent again. 45 for the buyers, that's uniform across the board. This again, in my opinion, should give this vehicle breathing room, but we saw last week that it was already moving. Well, no, it's moving at 45 million, so that should be sellers above that. 47, 43 for the buyers. All right, well, it's just a reality, I guess we have to accept. The market does not want this vehicle in the same range as it wants a Confessor, Hecate or Jackdaw, but 47 is back in that normal range, and so the small trade was there on this final downtrend. Could have probably bought for 38 pretty easy. What did I try? I think I got a buy order that never 39 including taxes. If you manage to grab something close to that, you can now sell at 47 million. It's looking pretty good. So the trade did materialize with a very big lag though, and this just cements to me that this vehicle is in a league of its own, and in a bad way at the moment. The market just does not like the ship enough to bring it in line with Confessor, Hecate and Jackdaw action just yet. For the cruisers, we've got the Legion that spiked up last week, I think, to 200 million, and is just sort of staying there for the sellers. 200 for the sellers, 180 to 170 for the buyers. That margin is opening up pretty quickly. So if you want a Legion hull, I'd say put up a buy order. Definitely don't go to the sellers. Then we get the Loki going back down a little bit, 193 to 182. Pretty much normal average, not much to say here. Proteus, same story, 191 to 173. It's less popular, so a bit more margin between sellers and buyers, but this feels like, you know, considering the new reality for Tech Tree cruisers, that you can fly them without risking skill points. This all does seem to have stabilized them at a pretty high price. 196 as well for the Tengu, 180 for the buyers. Again, a decent margin here. That has opened up a little bit, but the average prices are staying pretty high, so it's not easy to pick up a buy order in these Tech Tree cruisers. There's no special deals, massive supplies or anything like that to report on this one. And then for the final product, well, we're gonna take a look at those mining ships. Let's see if the announcements have had big impacts on those, coming in at 43.30. There we go. And so now we're looking for, let's first start with the mining barges. That's pretty obvious that that these get changes should see quite a bit of increased use, and here it is. Here's the Hulk, for instance. Let's just start with the Tech 2s. So here's the volumes on the day of the dev block, from 230 million going up to 300 million and still costing 278 to 260 for the buyers. Now I didn't do it, just time wise, guys, sorry about that, but I just don't have that much time for gaming at the moment. But when was it? Could have been April or something like that, when CCP was doing like sort of the virtual, a couple of virtual Twitch streams, when normally we would have expected a fan fest. They did talk about these plans to take a look at the mining ships, and I think that's when I said that, all right, well, what do we expect there? Obviously, Rorqual nerf, probably, possibly Orca nerf, and so then look, of course, at these mining barges as potential investments. And so it's still relative, right? April, May, they were quite high, but if you kept that in the back of your mind and you bought the dips, you could say below 250-ish here, that started to be quite nice. Then, of course, right now you're looking at a very nice trade due to the dev block finally dropping. Mackinac, same story. Late October going below 200 million ISK and currently selling for 280 to 66 for the buyers. And then the Skiff should see something very similar. Yep, mid-October going down towards 200 million. And now selling back at the high point of the summer, 280 for the sellers, 258 for the buyers. Then for the Tech 1 chips, here is the Coveter chart. Definitely a little bit less price-wise, of course, but the volume impact is there. Lots of players getting those chips ready because they will be needed if you want to just get the most out of the time of a fleet. Coveter down from 35 million and now up to 41 million for the sellers. The Procurer, same story, actually a couple of data points above 50 at the moment. No, it's 40 million for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. So definitely, yeah, more expensive all of a sudden. And then the Retriever actually went from a 1-year low point, so you could have probably bought close to 32 million, let's say 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and they're now selling at 40 million ISK. So the mining barges, clearly, right, CCP also mentioned it in the extra forum post, that the philosophy there is give them more HP, more survivability, and give them better yields. They don't have massive cargo holds, so then that interaction with command ships does make a lot of sense. If you fly in a fleet and you want to get the most out of your fleet, they are going to play a role. But at least the industrial mining ships won't feel like it's not even worth it to put out my drones anymore at the moment. Then let's see, is it in frigates? And then we get some type of ore frigates. Yeah, there we go. Definitely want to take a look at the Venture here as well. Let's see if that one moved price-wise. All right, no. That's interesting. I think the Venture was at first announced to be nerfed gas-wise, but I think that'll be reverted. Again, same thing, right? Punishing a playstyle that is quite often also one of the first risky playstyles that you introduce new players to. Gas huffing in wormhole space, for instance, didn't make a lot of sense, but yeah, I guess that the Venture is so ubiquitous, costing 300,000 ISK, so available that it can just shrug off even CCP announcements. There should be others as well. Where are they? Faction frigate, precursor frigates, no. Let's see, what are their names then? How do I find those? Industrial ships, let's see, transport ships, or so let's take a look at the Orca and the Porpoise. All right, Orca prices dipping, of course, on the announcement, no longer your high-sec solo platform endgame goal. If you want the most yield, Orca down to, well, that's relative, 1.7 billion for the sellers, 1.6 billion for the buyers. Obviously, once it gets the ability to compress, it does have its niche use as well. Let's just hope that it doesn't become a massive time sink. And then the porpoise actually up a little bit in price, because that one was then bound to become a potentially compression platform as well. Very interesting in that different response, 91 million to 85 million. Rorcal, we won't check that here, doesn't make a lot of sense, but there were still like expedition frigates or something like that. Let's see if here we go. Endurance and Prospect. So Endurance went up in price on the announcement, massive volumes as well, was below 20 million and is currently costing 23 million. That's actually quite doable. And then we've got the Prospect that also went up in price to 25 million at the moment. I think 24 million. It's already coming back down a little bit. 19 million for the buyer. So honestly, for these frigates, expedition frigates, a little bit of rumblings in the Tech 2. Tech 1 just completely shrugged it off. The exhumers, of course, becoming way more important. The best yields are to be found in the mining barges, so those are up in price. And then the Orca taking a little bit of a beating, and I can imagine that in the nullstick market, the Rorcal is taking a massive beating in price, in value at the moment as well. But yeah, again, I was kind of neutral, and considering the changes that CCP announced to their plans now, which I think is due to the feedback and the noise that was made from the players as well, but they also listened to the CSM, and they in fact mentioned it that they very early on put the stuff on CC and put out a dev blog for the purpose that they knew that this would be quite a revolution, and that they may have missed the mark on some things, which I think they did for the compression. And so I'm back to positive. I'm actually probably still going to fly my Orca as well for mining, and maybe just have one of the mining barges in there to see how big the difference is, or depending on my mood. Because I do think that you have to look out for gankers once you get into a mining barge. But alright, that mining waste doesn't feel so punishing anymore. It's not so punishing for new players. That's a very big change as well. So overall, I'm back to a more positive outlook, I would say, for the mining changes. It should now still be quite okay with getting that extra utility potentially for the Orca. So we'll see how all of that develops, of course. But for now, that's it for this Eve Talk. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And as always, I'll see you next time.